So tonight our speaker is John Turk, who will share talks with a Siberian shaman, viewing wilderness through magic or logic. We encourage you to come back for our final lecture. Next week, Chris Filardi is going to be speaking. He's a conservation, biodiversity scientist with the Biodiversity and Conservation Center through the American Museum of Natural History. He's going to be just returning from the Solomon Islands, where he's been on an expedition there, and his talk is titled Exploring Islands in Time, Accidental Encounters with Wilderness in the Solomon Islands. I think John Turk has the most intriguing bio of the series, and people have been asking me what you're going to talk about, and the bio is John Turk, research chemist turned chicken farmer, horse logger, adventurer, and writer. So there are obviously many stories embedded here, and the most linear tale is that John grew up on the shores of a wooded lake in Connecticut. He went to Phillips Academy in Andover and then did his undergraduate education at Brown. He went on to do a PhD in organic chemistry at the University of Colorado in 1971. That was around the time of Earth Day. He decided to give up science and laboratory work and went into environmental education, expeditions, and eventually into writing. Somewhere in there, and I'm not sure the order of it, he also tried his hand at carpentry, commercial fishing, chicken farming, and that horse lugging. But it's apparent from what he's done with his life that his enduring passions have been the expeditions and also his writing. He has kayaked across the North Pacific and around Cape Horn. He has mountain biked through the Gobi Desert. He has made first climbing ascents of big walls on Baffin Island. And he's done first ski descents in the Tian Shan Mountains. His 2-year voyage around the North Pacific Rim was named by Paddler magazine as one of the 10 greatest sea kayaking expeditions of all time. As for his writing, he's written a trilogy outlining his journeys and insights gained from the people and landscapes in these remote parts of the world. In 1998, he wrote Cold Oceans, Adventures in Kayak, Rowboat, and Dog Sled, which explores the mindset of expedition failure and success. In 2005, he wrote In the Wake of the Shaman, which examines the role of adventure and migration in both modern and Stone Age cultures. His last book, which is still under contract and not yet released yet, is The Raven's Gift, combining adventure with an exploration of Siberian shamanism. Since his first book release in 1998, and in fact there was another book in there, he also wrote the first environmental textbook in North America. He's given lots of talks, 125 slideshows, readings, 46 radio interviews, 21 print interviews, and 13 television interviews. So tonight, we get the pleasure of him talking about his experience on the frozen tundra of Siberia 30 years later, when a 100-year-old shaman helped him realize that formal education is not enough and that environmental conservation requires a spiritual connection with nature. So please join me in welcoming John Turk.
Well, thank you. It's a really great honor to be here and to be asked to be here at the university. It happens to be essentially my hometown, but I see a lot of people that I don't know, so somebody thinks I'm going to say something worthwhile. Every day, each and every one of us, probably several times a day, has to decide between logic and magic. It might be something simple. Do I sit at my computer and pay the bills? Logic. Or do I play with my children? Magic. I balance on this ball as a metaphor that we are all teetering between these two choices. This is no secret. We all know that we have choices in life, but for me, the point was made especially poignant when I was in the harshest of all places, in northeast Siberia. You would think that Siberia is a place where survival would depend on left brain pragmatism. But it is here that I learned that dreams underlie strong deeds. It is here that I learned that magic flies around us all the time, waiting only to be realized. Magic is a loaded word. For some of us, it evokes positive images of spirituality. For others, roll their eyes and think about woo-woo crackpotism. Some people think back to their childhood and remember fond images of men with dark hats sawing ladies in half. Gorshey Sharpak, who won a Nobel Prize in physics, got so negatively excited about the word magic that he wrote a whole book called Debunked, in which he proves that magic does not exist. QED. Can I go home now? I'm no stranger to Charpak's mindset. I have a PhD in organic chemistry. It was my job to float molecules through a high vacuum and blast them apart with electrons, explode them into many pieces, and try through the explosions and through the fragmentations to understand something a little bit deeper about the quantum mechanical nature of matter. It was a world of linear logic. QED. Can I have my PhD now? In 1971, I stuffed my sheepskin in the glove box of a 1964 Ford Fairlane, headed north with the canoe on the top. And I went into the Arctic. I knew nothing about Arctic travel, and over the next number of years, I was somewhat of a bumbler, wandering through Arctic places and getting myself into all kinds of trouble. My first book, Cold Oceans, outlines this progression from the bumbler to somebody who perhaps was less than a bumbler. In 1999, now we've jumped ahead 30 years, in 1999 I decided to kayak across the Pacific Ocean in a conventional out-of-the-store kayak from Japan, here on the left, 3,000 miles along the arc of the North Pacific Rim, along the coast of the Bering Sea, to Alaska. When I first started researching this trip, the holy grail of expeditions is to do something that's, quote, never been done before. And I thought that this, in fact, had never been done before. I looked through all the old copies of Sea Kayaker and whatnot and called people up, and they said, no, it's never been done before. But that wasn't true. Now, when we were in high school, what we learned was that North America was first populated by people, terrestrial-based people who walked across the Bering Land Bridge, which was a strip of land that was open during the glaciation when sea level was lower. Now, these were tough people. I mean, anybody who makes their living by stabbing mammoths to death is a tough person. I'm not trying to take anything away from these guys and gals, but the fact is that modern anthropological evidence is almost conclusive that the first settlers to North America were people who came by sea. We're not sure exactly what their boats looked like because boats don't survive very long in the fossil record. We're also not sure when they got here, but it was probably some version of a dugout canoe or a dugout canoe with high sides, simply because that's the simplest technology, a lot simpler than the first boat you saw, which was a kayak, which is a fairly complex structure to build. Well, I decided to follow this route, And I kayaked, it was a 2-year journey, 3,000 miles. I travel about 500 miles a month in a sea kayak. Made it along the Kuril Islands, up into Kamchatka, the northeast coast of Russia. Kamchatka is one of the most wonderful wildernesses on this planet. It's home to the largest concentration of active volcanoes and grizzly bears on the planet. Now, there's no ecological or geological reason why active volcanoes and grizzly bears should be in the same place, but they just happen to be here, and it gives this landscape a special character. From a technical sea kayaking point of view, what was exciting about this journey is that the coast is totally exposed to the full force of the Pacific. There are no islands, there's no protection. It's 6,000 to 7,000 miles of fetch. The wind blows uninterrupted across the entire Pacific, and there's very few natural harbors along the whole coast. It's a lot of sand spits and open coasts. So every day we had surf landings and launchings, which was, from a technical point of view, it's like, steep granite or something. It's something that you strive for. It's something that you try to find. And so from a technical point of view, it was a wonderful expedition until we ran into ice. So if you have surf, you're kayaking into the surf and the big waves are coming down and you're bracing and you're moving and you're making your move. But if you have refrigerator size to tractor trailer size chunks of ice in the surf, it becomes kind of nasty. Anyway, we did the journey, we completed the journey, and then I started to reflect about the journey of these people that came before us. And in my second book, In the Wake of the Shaman, I'm now going to read directly out of that book. Why did those adventurers abandon their home in the lush bamboo forests of Japan with salmon in the rivers, deer in the forests, and seals in the bays to paddle across the frigid Arctic? Anthropology texts argue that Stone Age people migrated when pushed out of their homeland by warfare or starvation, or when pulled into new lands by the promise of rich hunting. Yet I can't intuitively imagine that people would leave a productive, temperate environment and move into northeast Siberia in the middle of the ice ages to seek an easier existence. I've traveled by dog sled through the Arctic in the dead of winter and spent many years at sea in sailboats, kayaks, and commercial fishing boats, and I'm not convinced that the dictates of war or the stomach can explain such a voyage. Perhaps it's my own romantic proclivities, but I believe that pragmatists resolve their problems on land. They don't paddle across the Arctic in a hollow log. Okay, now, so that was the thesis of the book In the Wake of the Shaman. Clearly, paddling across the North Bering Sea in a dugout canoe, spearing whales and mammoths to death with a stick, with a piece of bone or ivory or stone tied on the end of the stick, is a bold physical accomplishment. No arguments, yeah? Everybody agrees with that. But when I wrote a book and told the world that this bold feat must have been driven by dreams and romantics, I got a whole huge raft of major criticism. The critics told me, no, this is a linear world. Linear logic rules. A leads to B. People moved into the Arctic when they were pushed out of their homeland by warfare or starvation, or pulled into new grounds by the promise of rich hunting. QED. I made some mistakes in writing in developing the argument in the Shaman book, but I'm unapologetic of the message. So I went about to write another book to get the point back on paper. Okay, so I'm going to back up now to the middle of this trip, of the middle of this expedition. We were paddling along the coast of Kamchatka, and this big storm came in. It was a weird storm because the barometer didn't drop. It just all of a sudden started to howl. And we happened to be right near this village of Vivenka, so we come in through the surf, land on the surf, get out of the boats, and there's this woman waiting on the beach. She's wearing a dog skin cap and a big long woolen coat. This is the middle of July. And I'm, kind of jagged and ragged because I've been in the boat for 13 hours. I'm cramped. I'm getting out of the boat. And she says, "Welcome. We were expecting you." Yeah, whatever. So I kind of look at her and she says, "The old lady, our grandmother, brought this storm to bring you to the village because she wants to talk to you." Okay. You see, I'm a traveler. We travel without support. We don't make mail food ahead of us. We're dependent on the kindness of strangers. It's not a position to be critical. I said, "Great." And pretty soon we were inside the house and eating food in a nice warm house, drying our clothes, and I let the whole matter drop. Well, we met this woman, Mulanat, up at fish camp. The storm went on for 3 days, and nothing really much happened. We had a little conversation and whatnot. Mulanat was born during the reign of Tsar Nicholas. She remembers the onset of the Bolshevik Revolution. In one of my scenes in my new book, which is not out yet, called The Raven's Gift, she's a 10-year-old girl standing on the top of a hill and watching her father down on the beach buying rifles to defend their tribe from the Bolsheviks. She lived during the entire reign of the Soviet Empire from the beginning to the end, during the terrors of Stalin, during the horrors of perestroika, freedom. And she's still alive today. I've been in email contact with people, blah, blah, blah. She's still alive as we speak. Well, when we finished this short visit, the storm died down. She said, "Would you come back? It will be good if you do." Well, this is some kind of magic. It's not the magic that you can dismiss just because you have a Nobel Prize in physics. It's the magic of exotic experiences. It's the magic of a powerful human being who asks me to come back. I've been a traveler all my life, and I said, "Yeah, I'll come back." And I did. Now this should play. Okay, this is a video, and it plays on my computer. Okay, it doesn't play. Well, so this woman asked me to come back. We came back. In the village of Vivenka, they had lost their reindeer, and she asked us to go off into the tundra and to find the reindeer, find reindeer people. The reindeer had been taken away through this horrible commotion of bureaucracy and graft and corruption and taxation and predation and poaching and murder and drunkenness. It's just this horrible loss. And the last reindeer were in their village probably 5 years before I got there. So we wandered out into the tundra. I really wish the video would play, but it doesn't. We wandered out into the tundra and found people who are still nomadic reindeer herders. Siberia is a huge place, 9 time zones from east to west. And we just wandered out there kind of looking for a herd of reindeer, and we found them. I mean, there's others out there. And so we spent some time and came back to the village. I'll go back to part of that journey in a second. Now, part of this, there's one scene from the reindeer herders that's particularly poignant that I want to talk about. If you're a reindeer herder, the biggest predation problem that you have to deal with is wolves. The wolves follow the herds and try to eat the deer. Now, this is northeast Siberia. The latitude is about 62 degrees, so it's below the Arctic Circle, but it's still pretty far north. During the winter, you have about 18 hours of nighttime. In order to protect your herd from the wolves, the herders are awake and outside all the time, 24/7. So think of an 18-hour night. Think of 50 below. Think of a blizzard howling across the land, and you're walking among the herd, protecting them from wolves. Okay, this is a hard thing physically. But now think of the next step. Think of what it takes to detect that there are wolves out there and to calm your herd and to chase the wolves away. It's my contention that linear logic does not work in a situation like this. There's an entire gestalt of feeling the entire situation, sensing the reindeer, sensing things going on in the darkness during the blizzard. If there's one image I would like you to take with you from this talk tonight, it is that wilderness teaches you to input a huge, complex array of sensory information, integrate it, and come to a single definite conclusion. There's a wolf out there lurking, or there isn't. And if there's a wolf, it's over there, and I got to go over there with my spear and chase it away. Okay, I'm going to bring this a little closer to home. We live here in western Montana. I happen to be a backcountry skier. This is a huge avalanche off the Bow Glacier in Canada. Snow stability, avalanche prediction, is a complex scientific problem. People get PhDs in snow physics. But even the most sophisticated expert in avalanches really can't tell you on a given day, is this slope going to slide or is it not going to slide? The backcountry skier has to make that decision every day. Yes, I can ski this slope, or no. It will avalanche and it will kill me. There is no room for error. A baseball player draws a multi-million-dollar salary if he hits a third of the balls pitched at him. An NBA basketball player draws an equally large salary if he hits 50% from the floor. For a backcountry skier, 99% accuracy is not good enough. What keeps the backcountry skier alive? It's the linear knowledge of snow physics, but it's also this complex gestalt of bringing in parallel information from many sources. It's intuition. It's being totally aware of the environment, the feel of the snow, all the changes that the snow has gone through over the past however much time. It's being mindful, curious, and observant. So wait a minute. I started out talking about magic, and then I took a quick jump into parallel logic and reasoning. Did I miss something? No, not at all. Imagine that you believe that the world is magical. You don't know where the magic is coming from. You're out in the woods. Let's take the backcountry analogy again. It might be a raven that flies overhead. It might be some beautiful crystals on the edge of a spruce bough. It might be a dead spar that's swirled and covered with snow and snow snaking over the spar. There's magic out there. Sights, sounds, and smells. It's not so much looking for it, logging it in. I saw 7 examples of magic today and put it in your notebook. It's becoming part of it. So in looking for magic, you build a positive spiral. And suddenly the world becomes magical because you believe that it is. Now, it just so happens that this awareness, this presence, this consciousness has a huge practical survival value. It is the consciousness of the reindeer herder. It is the consciousness that keeps the backcountry skier alive. It has enabled the Koryak people to survive for millennia in one of the harshest environments on the earth. In 1997, I was skiing in British Columbia in the East Kootenays, and I wasn't aware. I made a mistake. Looking back at the day, there were symbols and signs that I didn't pay attention to. I dismissed data. I got caught in an avalanche. The background of this image is an X-ray of my pelvis, bolted together with a steel plate and 4 large screws. Well, I got bolted together, the surgeons did their thing, and I was back on skis, but episodically I was really not in good shape. Some days I would go skiing, and some days I would crawl to the bathroom to take a leak. So they recommended a second surgery, but instead I decided to go to Siberia and shoot that film of the reindeer people. So we were coming home from the reindeer people with snow machines with the hunters, Olek and Sergei, and it was late in the season. It was April. The creeks were starting to open up, break up. We dropped the snow machine through the creek, and I ran down to help muscle it out, and I had a heavy snow machine in my arms, and I slipped and landed on one leg and tweaked my pelvis. The next thing I knew, I was writhing around in the snow, unable to walk. So Lex said, hey, don't worry about it. We'll take you to Mulanot and she'll fix you up. You've been helping us out by going find the reindeer people. She owes you a favor. No problem. So she has me stand, that light is right in my face. She has me stand on one leg with one arm behind my back and the other arm out in front of me. And she says, I'm going to go to the other world and talk to Kutka. And I'm going to ask him to fix up your pelvis. But you have to believe. And I thought, I'm a chemist from suburban Connecticut. I went to high school with George W. Bush. And she looked at me. And she said, if you don't believe, and I go to the other world, it will be bad for both of us. And I said, my mother never told me to believe in Kudcha, but I'll try. And I got better. Yeah, okay. I've spent 8 years thinking about the healing. I don't know what happened, and we're not going there. That's not the point. Either she healed me, or my body coincidentally happened to heal itself at precisely the same moment that she spit on my pubic hair and rubbed me with seal fat. The important point is, what exactly did I promise Mulanat I would believe in? Before I answer that, let me tell you another little story. Mulanat is the last of the Koryak shaman. 10 years ago, there were 2 Koryak shaman. One of them lived in another town a little bit farther to south, down in the forest in Magadan. When this woman realized that she was about to die, she tried to pass on her power to somebody else. And nobody could receive it. People tried, but nobody could receive it. And this woman realized that in the next generation, everybody had been pulled off the tundra, been pulled out of the Urangas, out of their life with the reindeer, and sent to Soviet schools. And she realized that nobody who had spent their formative years in a Soviet school could learn the power. So she went out to the forest and she put her arms around a tree and she passed her power into the tree, and the tree exploded and she died.
What kind of tree?
Excuse me?
What kind of tree?
What kind of tree? I don't know. I don't know what kind of tree. I'm sorry. We've all been blinded to some extent by going to school. I believe our teachers went a little overboard. They taught us to line up shortest to tallest, not to shuffle. When I was in 2nd grade, I got called into the principal's office for the crime of daydreaming. They called my mother. They called it not paying attention. When Black Elk, the great Ogallala Sioux medicine man, had a dream as a young boy, they didn't send him to the principal's office. They called a council, and the chiefs came, and the warriors came, and the elders came, and the mothers came, and the little children came, and they said, "What was your dream? Tell us. This is important." In Aboriginal spirituality, the dream world and the real world are inseparable. Spirituality, dreams, and strong deeds are all closely related. I write another quote directly out of my book, In the Wake of the Shaman. Almost every time I read about Stone Age life, I stumble onto some sentimental, time-wasting, or risky activity, such as burying a child on a lemming-tooth mat, shoving a double-bladed stiletto into a grizzly bear's mouth and then leading it about by a leather thong, or paddling a dugout canoe from Japan to Alaska. The wonderful paradox is that inefficient endeavors aren't mere dead weight breaking the back of pragmatism. They are fundamental components of our humanity. This is a lecture series about the value of wilderness. I was in Wisconsin last weekend at some kayak convention, and I ended up in a bar. And there was a NCAA basketball game going on, another basketball game going on over here. There was loud music playing over here. There was not one, but two people simultaneously trying to show me a YouTube video on their iPhones, and there was somebody talking to me all at the same time. And I realized that my survival in this environment was absolutely essential on filtering out information. I had to close myself off. There's young men playing their heart out, their whole careers on the line, not interested. Other guys over there, not interested. Some musician playing his heart out or her heart out, not interested. 2 YouTube videos coming at me. My job in this environment was to filter out information. But my job as a backcountry skier is not to filter anything out, to take everything in. And when you take everything in, the world becomes magical. Yeah. And you stay alive, and you keep going. About a month after this last slide here, we ended up in this guy's camp. And this man was named Alexei, and he said to me, "Well, why'd you come here?" I said, "Well, because, you see, Mulanat and Kutka healed my pelvis, and I got confused about why, so I wanted to thank Mulanat, but she told me I had to thank Kutka, but I couldn't get to see Kutka, so I decided to walk across the tundra for a couple months and see what happens." And he said, "You're right. Kutka is only a messenger god. He is not your highest god. Our God is the whole tundra. You must understand that God lives in every rock, lichen, ptarmigan, and sedge. Tak," he continued with a smile, "you are offering your thanks for healing simply by skiing across wind-blown snow and frozen rivers. The tundra is listening to you. If you listen back, it will talk to you." There are a lot of skeptics in the world. You can believe this or not. It's up to you. Let me rephrase what Alexei said in a language that is more familiar to people with a scientific background. Professor Frances Kuo of the University of Illinois conducted a series of studies in which she observed that humans who live in concrete environments with no grasses and trees undergo social, psychological, and physical breakdown. We are more efficient when we take the time to smell the flowers, whatever efficiency means. If you get into this deep enough, the word efficiency doesn't count anyway, but the wild spaces on this planet are embedded in our history and our genes. They are absolutely essential to our emotional and spiritual wellness. We are functional only when we take time to be non-functional. What did I promise Mulanat? I promised to try to be open to every detail and along the way to accept the good and the bad, the strange and the mundane, familiar and unfamiliar forms of consciousness. In Siberia, the harshest of physical landscapes, I learned that the road to pragmatism lies in awareness and acceptance. Everything else is secondary. Almost every day now, I think about the paintings on the Chauvet caves, fossil flutes carved out of the wing bone of a great crane, shamans on the Asian steppe buried lovingly with abalone from the sea. Our ancestors weren't linear. Nature isn't linear. Long division is linear. But you know, 21st century technology isn't linear either. You dream, you live, you stop to see the wonders around you, you pluck magic out of the air. That's what I learned from wilderness, and that's what I promised Moulinot. I'm going to read one final quote from the Shaman book. I'm at the end of the journey. It was the hardest journey of my life. The North Bering Sea is truly a gnarly piece of water, and we were beat up. I remember a few weeks before, we got caught in a big storm, and I called my wife on the satellite phone, and I just broke down totally in tears. And she says, "Are you all right?" I said, "No, I'm not all right. You know, it's scary out here. I'm getting beat up." We finally made the long crossing over to Alaska to St. Lawrence Island, and we really lucked out. The winds and the currents just all lined up, and it was a 38-mile crossing to a tiny little point of land, and we did it. And I write, in my youth, I had assumed that romanticism is frilly-faced and soft-bellied, and logic and pragmatism must underlie strong deeds. I don't believe that anymore. I had followed my internal voices for 2 years and 3,000 hard-scrabble miles, and in that space and time, I learned that great accomplishments are driven by quixotic images and quiet but persistent dreams. This is my last slide. I'm taking you out of the Arctic. We're in Melanesia now. This young boy is reaching for a bubble. I use this as a symbol because he knows with absolute certainty that the moment he touches that bubble, it will disappear. This thing that he is reaching for, this goal that he is jumping at, will disappear the moment he attains it. And that's the last image I'd like to leave with you tonight. Thank you. I have books and note cards of images from this slideshow for sale at the end of this whole process, but now we have approximately a half an hour, I believe, for questions. And I don't hear very well, so I might have to run up and listen a little bit closer. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that the way that the reindeer herders see wolves and experience the world at night, do you feel it's the same magical, hyper-aware way that animals experience the world?
That what?
Other animals experience the world,
Yeah.
like the reindeer themselves.
Okay, the question was this hyper-awareness that the herders have to sense wolves at night, is this the same awareness that other animals have? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And it's, you know, I think that there's a lot less difference in consciousness between other animals and us than a lot of scientists say that there is. And I think that there's a lot to learn from the way other animals perceive the world in a nonverbal sense. The use of language and the thinking of the world in language has taken something away from us. And if we back off of that, like a blind person gaining other senses, I think that we come deeper into that animal instinct. And, you know, and there's a really lot to be learned there. Many, many animals, for example, when the food supply decreases, they stop procreating. There's a balance. I mean, it's not always, you know, there's imbalances in nature. Don't let me say that nature is always perfectly balanced, because it isn't true. But I think that in many cases, if we go into our animal instincts, we have a much healthier perception of the world. Thank you. Yeah?
What will happen when Molinup dies and there's no more?
Wait a minute. Yeah.
What will happen when Molinup dies and there's no more shamans in the village?
Okay. The question is, what will happen when Mulanat dies and there are no more shamans in the world? I was in touch with my friend Misha, who was in touch with Lydia and Oleg a couple of months ago. And he asked how Mulanat was, and the answer was, she's not ready to die yet because she's trying to teach Lydia her power. When we finally lose that power, well, we as humanity are kind of off on a limb, you know? We're chartering new territory. We've given up the wisdom that has kept us alive for a couple million years, depending on when you count the start begins. I don't know what's going to happen. You're sort of asking me what's going to happen to the human race over the next couple centuries, and I don't have that answer, but it's a loss. And what we're trying to do, you know, I went to school. I don't have the power. None of us have the power. But I think what we want to do, I think if I, could offer suggestions, it would be to spend time, as much time as we can, out of doors, in untouched landscapes, and each person personally to try to capture as much as that as possible. You don't have to get all the way there, just however much you get is what you got. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it's the best I can do. Yeah.
You gain vision from near-death experiences. You probably had quite a few.
Dr. Sears over here asked me about visions from near-death experiences. There's two kinds of near-death experiences. One is the near-death experiences of a catastrophic accident. And in that near-death experience, I've been in a few of those, and I don't have any visions. It's all just a clarity of convincing myself that I am not going to die, and I'm not going to die because I am still in control of the situation. When I was in that avalanche, hurtling down the slope at 50 or 60 miles an hour, tumbling and churning and roiling snow, I didn't have time for visions. I was thinking about swimming to the surface. I was thinking about my body position. Head up, head down, head up, head down, swim. I was thinking about, I knew the shape of the ski run. I was thinking, what's going to happen when I hit that bench and kind of level out? I wasn't having any visions. I mean, other people have different experiences, but that was mine. The other kind of near-death experience that actually ascetics from Jesus on, many people over a long period of time, is the ecstatic experience of shamanistic experiences where you push yourself through starvation, through thirst, through, the sun dance where you're hanging by meat hooks from a pole in the hot sun, is to approach death as an ecstatic experience. And the shamanistic techniques from the jungles, from the tropical jungles of the Amazon to the high Arctic are all very similar. There are many ways to ecstasy. People use certain kinds of drugs. People use certain kind of dance. They use music. But one of the routes to ecstasy is extreme near-death experience, as Jim points out. Yeah. I think that's why Mulanat sent me across the tundra. I didn't tell this part of the story, but she told me I had to go to see Kutcha in the other world, and she gave me a mushroom to eat, and I started marching off to the other world. I'm going to go see Kutcha, and we're going to shake hands to wing, and then I got scared. And no, I ain't going there, I was afraid that when I got to the other world, I wouldn't come back. And so then Oleg said, if you want to go to the other world, really you can just do it in the tundra. You're a better traveler in the real world than in the spirit world. But it's the same thing. You're going to the edge. I'm going to the other world. I'm going across the tundra. And then you get cold and hungry and really tired. And you start thinking, well, maybe I'm pushing it too far. Maybe I'm not going to be able to get back. So that's certainly a time-honored technique of, when you say ecstasy and you think of bringing yourself close to the portal of death, it doesn't seem like exactly the same word and connotation, but in shamanistic visions world over it is. Did that answer your question, Jim? Sort of. Wandering around it. We don't have any more questions. Oh, we do. One way back there.
So you said that when you were in that avalanche and some years back, you looking back on the experience, there were a number of good signs that you felt like you ignored. When you were at the top of the slope, about to ski down it, did you get any kind of bad feeling or sinking feeling before it all happened?
Oh, okay, good question. Thank you. The question is, I said that looking back on the avalanche, I realized that there were signs I missed. And the question was, standing on top of the slope just before I jumped in, did I have any premonition that I ignored? I just read a book called Exploring the Infinite by Maria Coffey about this kind of premonition. People who saw their own death just before major mountaineering accidents. Every time I ski a big slope, just before I let them go and point the tips downhill and drop into the fall line, I have a little bit of a queasy feeling in my stomach, like, oh boy, here we go. On that day, I was the 15th person to ski that slope. I was 3 feet from the nearest set of tracks. I thought I was clean. I didn't have a premonition. Yeah?
What were the signs that you missed then?
What were the signs that I avoided? Now we're getting into technical questions about avalanche stability. We had skied a roll a little bit farther over. We've been skiing this slope for 2 days. It was one of these things, for those of you who aren't avalanche people, excuse me for a second, because It was a legitimate technical question. I'm going to answer it. What had happened was there had been a big storm sequence, and then during the night, when people were asleep and didn't see it, the storm had broken, and there was about an 8-hour period of cold, clear weather. And then it started to snow again, so there was a series of surface hoar crystals that had formed during that night that we didn't know about. And we had skied that slope all the day before, put 12 tracks down it, and then there were 2 more tracks that morning. But previous to that, we had been coming, when we had been approaching that slope, this woman, Linda, had skied over a steep little roll and it had fractured. Just a little pop-off, we call it, just 30 centimeters, maybe, 10 meters wide or something, and it's just a small roll. And we went, yeah, whatever. But we should have then stopped and said, what is going on? And we should have dug a pit right then and there. And we would have found that surface hoar layer, and we wouldn't have skied that slope. So from a technical point, that's the answer. Yeah?
When you started your first kayak journey that you talked about, you kind of began to elevate yourself in the eyes of the world, and you maybe make the pages of Harvard Magazine or something like that, it sounds like. And I'm wondering how your friends' experiences differed from your own, of the people who were on that same trip, and also how you would have begun that trip differently with the perspective that you have today.
This is about the trip to Alaska?
Yeah, the paddling from the phone.
Okay. The question, thank you. The question was the trip to Alaska across the North Pacific Sea, North Pacific. In the words of the questioners, elevated my my stature in the adventure world, and how did it change me? How would I have seen it different? How did it affect the other people who were on the trip? Is that the fair repeat of the question? Well, the one good thing about really good trips is that usually, if they're good enough, nobody else will go with you. All of my potential partners from North America had backed out of that trip at one point or another. And I ended up paddling with this fellow, Misha, who's a Russian, who had never been in a kayak before in his life. We took him out into a lake about the size of Frenchtown Pond. You people know where Frenchtown Pond is? And we paddled around for an hour, and then we jumped into the Pacific Ocean, and we took off going north. And Misha's a pretty incredible person. So you're asking a question about what did my other North American counterparts, how did they react? And the answer is I didn't have any North American counterparts. It was just me and Misha. And Misha's really cool. And Misha's a geologist, a hydrogeologist. He's a trained scientist, but he has a very deep spiritual background. And I think, if anything, Misha has been wandering around Kamchatka for 20 or 30 years, and this was perfectly normal to him. So actually, my 3 books now, Cold Oceans, which was my first, Shaman, which is the second, and The Raven's Gift, which is the third, which is not yet out, actually form a trilogy, because in the beginning, my stature in the world, my sponsorship, meant everything to me. I had to succeed, I had to get there, even if it meant arguing with my expedition partners, and then I got more sponsorship, more stature, more book contracts, and over the last 20 years, I'm a geezer now, I'm old. There has been an amazing shift, and the shift has occurred because of the people and the places and the environments that I met along the way. The act of observing has changed the observer. Isn't that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? Steve would know. Yeah.
It seems like when you injured your pelvis
and you were healed by the shaman. That was a kind of transformative experience for you. And that was kind of the starting part where you started to believe less in pragmatism and more in magic. And I was wondering, without having that same experience, is there any advice you have for people who could open up their eyes to that same perspective?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. The question was that the healing was a transformative experience and a big jolt to get me to go into another level of thinking. And the questioner asked, without such experience, what advice do I have for anybody to go in the same direction, to believe? And the advice is a very old advice. You can get this advice from a lot of different sources. I'm not the person who made this up. This is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, and there's many ways to go there. I'm the messenger, I'm not the teacher. But if you do look at the whole host of religious and experiential and spiritual experience over the last 10,000 years, there's a lot of people who've been on this quest. And it's just living in the now, being present, being aware, and trying to go there all the time. You know, like I say, I'm a messenger, not a guru. You know, I'm just bringing this word from from Siberia. And, you know, we all stumble along the way all the time. But it's just trying to be in the now and trying to be observant, not trying to filter things out like you have to do in the bar. Put yourself in situations where that's possible. Yeah.
Do you have a personal relationship with the raven?
Oh, this woman asked, do I have a personal relationship with the raven? I think I do. My wife, Chris, who I was with for 25 years, died in a mountaineering accident almost 4 years ago today. When I took her ashes up to the top of a mountain, a classic ski line, the ski line that I look at every day out the window of my apartment in Fernie, British Columbia. It was raining. Dark clouds were sweeping across the sky, and the rain was coming across in sheets. I got to the top of the ridge just below the high peak, and I was standing above a 2,000-foot ski line. And I was standing there. It was summertime. It was August. It was all talus. It wasn't snow. I was looking down the ski line, and a raven came and hovered overhead just above the height of my outstretched arm. And then it took off down the slope at about waist high, making turns down the slope until it was a tiny dot in the floor below. And I could barely see it. And then it rose up and it came back. And it came back again to within just above hand height. And I looked up at the raven and it looked down at me and it took off and it skied down the slope again. And then it came back and it flew away. Yeah. Yeah, I think I have a personal relationship with the raven, and it's kind of neat because, you see, we live in a world that ravens exist in. There are ravens in our environment all the time. The other day I was walking home to my apartment in Fernie, and I was in a little bit of a bad mood about this, that, and the other thing, and I was telling myself stories that I didn't have to tell myself and making up situations that I didn't need to make up, and generally kind of in a grumpy mood. And I was crossing Cold Creek, and this raven swept overhead, and then I looked up and there's 20 ravens in the trees around me, and they were all laughing at me. Now, a statistician can tell me that, I just made up this coincidence. Coincidences are something that either happen or that you piece together and create for yourself because you feel like it. It doesn't matter. The ravens laughed at me. I said, thank you, I'm sorry, I was in a better mood. So yeah, I believe in it, I believe in it, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Question. You wanted to know more about Siberian Shaman. What is your impact or point of view with the native shamans of America?
Oh, the question is, now that I've had a relationship with a Siberian shaman, what is my relationship or my view with shamans from North America? Well, I believe very deeply in Aboriginal spirituality and animistic spirituality throughout the world, not just North America, or not Siberia, in the Amazon, anywhere that it exists. The spirituality that is based in ecstatic experience, in communication with landscapes, in communication with animals, is a spirituality that I believe in. I haven't been fortunate enough to have had a personal relationship with healers in North America. Maybe that will come. I remember once I was driving across the desert in Arizona near Cayenta, headed towards the Four Corners, and I picked up this young hitchhiker, and I was hungry. I say he was a Navajo guy, a young guy. Hungry, I bought him some lunch in a cafe in Cayenta, and we're driving across the desert, and he said, would you come to me? We're having a peyote ceremony with my grandfather. And I looked at my watch and I said, oh shit, I got things to do. And I stopped in the middle of the desert, and he got out of the car and he walked off into the desert and disappeared. And that was 10 years ago, and I still regret that. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I had that opportunity, and I looked at my watch and said I had something else to do, and I didn't go. I'm not going to do that again. One more question. Do we have one up here? Yeah.
I was curious about the people you met on your journey, the native people in Siberia. Did they speak English to you? And how
do we communicate? The question was, what language did we communicate in? It's a hodgepodge of languages. Lydia, who is Moulinat's protege, who's about 40, speaks reasonably good English. Misha speaks excellent but not grammatical English. I speak a smattering of Russian. Some people speak Koryak, some people don't. We hodgepodged it together. Misha translates for me. He's my main man when it comes to translation. He's my partner in all of these things. But there's also a bit of nonverbal communication going on around here in a sense that, not in a woo-woo sense, but people don't talk about things so much. I never got a set of directives from Moulinat like Don Juan gave to Carlos. She never told me the way. It was more by just living out there among these people that I got it. But the actual verbal communication was mostly in Russian, mostly with Misha translating, a little bit in English, and some Koryak to Russian to English.
We actually have one more question about language.
Okay, one more question. Where is it? Yeah.
This connects with a lot of these other wonderful questions. You talked about connecting to animal consciousness through a different sensitivity to a different kind of language.
Okay.
And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how that might develop for people.
Yeah, the question was about animal consciousness and communication with animal consciousness and with the other level of communication. I think about this a lot. On the day, once in my life, I've carried my wife's ashes to the top of the mountain, a mountain. On that day, I was not only visited by the raven, as I just described, but also by a grizzly bear. These were significant visitations. So, was my extreme grief communicated in a way that those animals came to respond? The grizzly bear came up and woofed at me. That's a fact. Then you can interpret what that woof meant, but they showed up. The raven showed up. When I went to write it, when I was writing the raven's gift, I was like, now did that really happen? And Karen, Chris's sister, was with me. I picked up the phone. I said, Karen, did that really happen? She said, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Mulanat will take it a step farther and say you can communicate back and forth with a rock. There's a rock called the Holy Stone. It looks like a little volcanic plug about, maybe 3 meters high. And they go there to talk to it all the time. You know, I don't know where it starts and stops, but clearly, you can communicate with a dog without words. I mean, anybody who tells you that you're not communicating with a dog, we're on different planets. We may as well not have the conversation. You can communicate with the dog without words. So how far does that communication go? Well, I don't know. It ends up in that land of, we agree over here that the dog knows if you're angry or happy or sad or whatever without words. Then we have the raven visiting and skiing down the mountain. Now that one's a little harder to take. So what was going on there? See? And then there's a whole realm in between. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If I think I'm communicating with the ravens and they laugh at me because I'm in a bad mood, that's fine enough for me. I think in the end of this, I don't know why my pelvis is healed. I don't know why all these things happen. I don't care. But by believing in them, and this sounds like a little bit like a preacher, but by believing in them, I've changed my perspective on the world. Did that answer your question? Thank you. Thank you very much.